Well, is the Bible a bunch of made-up stories? You could say yes, because some of the Bible is made up of what we call parables. I mean, Jesus made up stories with a moral or theological point. This really drives at the issue of what kind of literature parts of the Bible is. In parables, sure, it's a made-up story with a philosophical point. Many of the Psalms of the Old Testament are a kind of literary style that uses metaphor. But this, I think, raises a crucial question. When you come to other parts of the Bible, say the Old Testament historical narratives, or the New Testament Gospels, or the letters we find in the New Testament, it's quite clear these aren't made-up stories. They're actually engaging in truth-telling. If you just think of the Old Testament stories about the great patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, some people used to think these stories were just made up, but the more we've discovered about ancient culture of the period these stories are set, the more we've come to believe that they have the flavour of truth-telling. These are stories that could have only been developed in the period in which the stories are set. You can move right through into the sort of middle of the Old Testament, King David. People began to think many decades ago that maybe David was just a fictional character, an ideal hero based on the Greek model. But then, accidentally, we discovered an inscription that talks about the house of David. And it's quite close in time to the purported events of King David. So now those skeptical scholars are a little bit embarrassed. Again, it's historical reporting. When we move into the Gospels, the first thing you're confronted with is they fit in the literary style that we know from antiquity of the bios, from which we get the word biography. Now, these aren't normal biographies in the modern sense, but they're normal biographies in the ancient sense. That is, they're real historical reports about a figure from antiquity. I'm not saying you can prove everything in the Gospels, but they have the character of real historical storytelling. Now, anyone who thinks that the Gospels themselves were just kind of metaphors of the spiritual life, and there are some theologians who think that, but theologians aren't constrained by things like historical evidence. The evidence we have tells us that these are real historical biographies of an extraordinary life. And we can sometimes check up on incidental details. Some scholars began to doubt, for instance, that there was this particular pool called the Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem, where one of the stories of Jesus is set. And some people, because we dug all around Jerusalem and not found this pool, thought it didn't exist. Maybe it's just a made-up story. And then just in 2004, in June 2004, they were doing some sewerage works in Old Jerusalem and uncovered these ancient steps. The Israel Antiquities Authority was brought in, they dug up the whole site. We have discovered the largest Jewish bathing pool ever found, smack bang in the middle of the Siloam district. I visited the pool twice now. It is without doubt the Pool of Siloam from the time of Jesus. I'm not saying you can prove everything from a historical point of view, but people who think the Bible is just a bunch of made-up stories haven't really read the serious literature on this question. The New Testament and the Old Testament are truth-telling.